The year is 2025, the Russo-Ukrainian War, a conflict that erupted in 2014 with Russia's annexation of Crimea, has entered a perilous new phase. What began as a fight for Ukraine's eastern territories has spiraled into a broader confrontation. The battleground now extends beyond Ukraine's internationally recognized borders, reaching into the heart of Russia itself. The Kursk Oblast, a region steeped in history and bordering Ukraine, has become a crucible of this escalating conflict, a stark symbol of the war's devastating reach. This is not just a conflict of tanks and troops, it is a war waged on multiple fronts, a struggle for territorial integrity, a battle for global influence, and a fight for the very soul of two nations. As Ukrainian forces launched their audacious incursion into Kursk in August 2024, they aimed to disrupt Russian supply lines and shift the war's momentum. This decision, however, opened a Pandora's box, drawing in new actors and raising the stakes to unprecedented levels. The conflict in Kursk is a microcosm of the larger geopolitical struggle playing out on the world stage. It lays bare the fault lines of a global order in flux, testing alliances, and exposing the fragility of peace. With each passing day, the fighting in Kursk sends shockwaves across the globe, raising profound questions about the future of Europe, the nature of warfare, and the very essence of international security. As the world watches with bated breath, the outcome of the battle for Kursk hangs in the balance. The fate of countless lives, the stability of a region, and the future of a continent teeter on a knife's edge. Understanding the conflict in Kursk is not merely an academic exercise, it is essential to comprehending the complex web of alliances, rivalries, and ideologies shaping the 21st century. Ukraine's decision to take the fight to Russian soil was a calculated gamble, a high-risk maneuver born out of necessity and desperation. After months of brutal fighting and facing a numerically superior enemy, Ukrainian forces were under immense pressure. Their counteroffensive in the Donbas region, while yielding some gains, had stalled, and the specter of a protracted war loomed large. The incursion into Kursk was more than just a military operation. It was a strategic masterstroke aimed at exploiting Russia's vulnerabilities and altering the war's narrative. By striking deep into Russian territory, Ukraine sought to disrupt crucial supply lines feeding the Russian war machine in the east. The move was also designed to boost the morale of Ukrainian troops and civilians, demonstrating their unwavering resolve and ability to take the fight to the enemy's heartland. Beyond the immediate military objectives, the Kursk incursion carried profound psychological and political implications. It shattered the Kremlin's narrative of a limited military operation, exposing the conflict's true nature and forcing ordinary Russians to confront the realities of the war they had unleashed. The move also served as a stark reminder to the international community that Ukraine was not merely fighting for its own survival, but actively resisting Russian aggression. However, the decision to cross the border was not without its risks. It threatened to escalate the conflict, potentially drawing NATO into a direct confrontation with Russia. Moreover, it raised concerns about whether Ukraine was overextending its forces, diverting crucial resources from the defense of its own territory. Despite these risks, the Ukrainian leadership calculated that the potential rewards outweighed the dangers, embarking on a daring gamble that could ultimately determine the fate of their nation.
The idyllic countryside of the Kursk Oblast transformed into a battleground as Ukrainian and Russian forces clashed in a series of fierce engagements. Villages and towns, once havens of tranquility, became theaters of destruction, their streets littered with the debris of war. The fighting was brutal and unforgiving, characterized by relentless artillery duels, close-quarters combat, and the constant threat of airstrikes.
Ukrainian forces, armed with Western-supplied weapons and buoyed by their initial successes, advanced rapidly into Kursk, capturing key towns and villages. Their objective was not to hold territory indefinitely, but to disrupt Russian logistics, inflict heavy casualties, and undermine Russian morale. They employed hit-and-run tactics, using their agility and knowledge of the terrain to their advantage.
The Russian response was swift and fierce. Reinforcements poured into the region, including elite airborne units and heavily armored formations. The Kremlin, caught off guard by the audacity of the Ukrainian incursion, unleashed a wave of airstrikes and missile attacks, targeting Ukrainian positions and infrastructure. The fighting was particularly intense around the town of Rilsk, where Ukrainian forces dug in, repelling repeated Russian assaults.
Adding a chilling new dimension to the conflict was the confirmed presence of North Korean troops fighting alongside Russian forces. The deployment of thousands of North Korean soldiers, equipped with their own arsenal of Soviet-era weaponry, raised alarming questions about the internationalization of the conflict and the potential for further escalation. The presence of these foreign fighters underscored the complex web of alliances and allegiances underpinning the war in Ukraine, transforming a regional conflict into a global powder keg. Amidst the deafening roar of artillery and the chilling whistle of falling bombs, it is the innocent civilians of Kursk who bear the brunt of the conflict's brutality. Their lives, once defined by the rhythms of rural life, have been shattered by the horrors of war. Their homes lie in ruins, their families torn apart, their futures shrouded in uncertainty.
The stories emerging from Kursk are heartbreaking testaments to the human cost of war. Grandmothers huddled in basements, seeking refuge from the shelling. Children, their innocence stolen, struggling to comprehend the violence engulfing their world. Families torn apart, fleeing their homes with only the clothes on their backs, seeking safety in overcrowded shelters, or embarking on perilous journeys across borders.
"We never thought the war would come to our doorstep," said Maria, a school teacher from a village near the border. "Now all we hear is the sound of explosions. Our lives have been turned upside down."
The humanitarian crisis in Kursk is deepening with each passing day. Hospitals are overwhelmed with casualties, basic necessities are in short supply, and the threat of disease outbreaks looms large. Aid agencies are struggling to reach those in need, hampered by the ongoing fighting and the destruction of infrastructure.
The conflict in Kursk is not just a tragedy for Ukraine and Russia, it is a humanitarian catastrophe with far-reaching consequences. The displacement of thousands of civilians, the trauma inflicted on a generation of children, and the destruction of livelihoods will have lasting repercussions long after the guns have fallen silent. The Ukrainian incursion into Kursk sent shockwaves through the corridors of power in Western capitals, triggering a flurry of diplomatic activity and reigniting the debate over the level of support for Ukraine. The United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union, while reaffirming their commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, found themselves walking a tightrope between providing crucial assistance and avoiding actions that could lead to a wider conflict with Russia.
The Biden administration, facing mounting pressure from both within the Democratic Party and across the aisle, authorized an additional $50 billion in military aid to Ukraine, including advanced rocket systems, air defense batteries, and intelligence sharing. The UK followed suit, pledging an additional $10 billion in military assistance and deploying a squadron of Typhoon fighter jets to Romania to bolster NATO's eastern flank.
However, the issue of providing Ukraine with long-range missiles capable of striking deep inside Russian territory remained a point of contention. While some argued that such weapons were necessary to deter further Russian aggression, others feared that their deployment could provoke a dangerous escalation, potentially drawing NATO into a direct confrontation with Russia.
The European Union, grappling with its own internal divisions and economic anxieties, struggled to maintain a united front. Germany, heavily reliant on Russian energy imports, remained wary of imposing further sanctions on Moscow, while Poland and the Baltic states, acutely aware of their vulnerability to Russian aggression, pushed for a more robust response.
The conflict in Kursk exposed the complexities and limitations of Western support for Ukraine. While the West was united in its condemnation of Russia's aggression, it remained divided over the best course of action, balancing its commitment to Ukrainian sovereignty with its fear of triggering a wider European war. The confirmation of North Korean troops fighting alongside Russian forces in Kursk sent shockwaves through the international community, raising profound questions about the evolving geopolitical landscape and the potential for further escalation of the conflict. This unlikely alliance, forged in the crucible of war, underscored the growing convergence of interests between two of the world's most isolated and heavily sanctioned states.
For Russia, the decision to enlist the support of North Korean troops was a sign of desperation, a tacit admission that its own military was struggling to achieve its objectives in Ukraine. The deployment of thousands of North Korean soldiers, while unlikely to alter the course of the war, provided much-needed manpower and eased the pressure on Russian forces.
For North Korea, the conflict in Ukraine presented a unique opportunity to curry favor with Moscow, secure much-needed hard currency, and gain valuable combat experience for its troops. The Kim regime, facing crippling economic sanctions and international isolation, saw in Russia a potential lifeline, a partner willing to defy Western pressure and provide a bulwark against perceived American aggression.
The burgeoning Russia-North Korea alliance had profound implications for regional and global security. It raised concerns about the potential transfer of advanced military technology, including ballistic missiles and nuclear know-how from North Korea to Russia. It also threatened to undermine the international sanctions regime against North Korea, as Russia could use its veto power at the UN Security Council to block any attempts to further isolate Pyongyang.